I just feel like we need to show up a lot more intentionally because logo placement is not a partnership. That's not a partnership. That's a bought sign. That's what that is.
It's a vendor relationship.
Exactly.
Today, I'm interviewing Stephynie Malik, but I am so blown away by Stephynie that, as you'll see in this episode, I actually forget to officially start the show. Our conversation just starts to roll when I ask her if she's comfortable talking about her history building these groundbreaking strategic partnerships. And then it was just too good to not keep going. So forgive the bumpy start, but the way that Stephynie breaks down how to approach people, handle business, client, and partner relationships is so incredibly wise and important. We talk about the most important questions to be asking to help you build true win-win, mutually beneficial partnerships. Hold on to your hats, my friends, because Stephynie is going to blow you away. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I figured we could just spend the first 5 minutes just kind of getting to know each other. And then the interview itself is very casual, just a fun conversation. If at any point I ask you a question, you're like, yeah, I don't want to answer that, you can just say that, we'll cut it out. It never happens, but I like to just
Yeah, I start my podcast the same way. I'm an open book. You can ask whatever you want. Just be careful because you will get the answer.
I love that. So I mean, do you feel like you have a sense for my work, or would it be helpful for me to kind of frame up the podcast a little bit and then tell you what I was
You
thinking?
can do whatever you want to do. I'm comfortable with whatever. I listened to a couple of them. They were both very, very different. So I feel like there was almost like a methodology or roadmap, but maybe not the same question. So whatever you're comfortable with, I'm fine with.
I mean, I think there's so many pieces of your experience that I feel like align with my audience. I mean, the crisis management piece is obviously huge, and kind of all your work, it sounds like you've been doing around that, especially recently, how do you lead through crisis, and, or maybe just talking about in the kind of COVID sense. So I think that's obviously huge. You posted, I can't remember when this was, but you posted something on LinkedIn about curiosity. And that is such a foundational principle of my work. So I'd love to spend time there because I loved what you wrote about it. And I just think that's so critical. And then you also have this long background in strategic partnerships.
Yeah.
So I know it's not something that I've seen you talk about necessarily recently, but what do you think about, are you open to talking about that piece?
Completely.
Do you think that's interesting? Okay.
I mean, Mallory, just so you know, that was such an so that actually, to be honest with you, I just got chills. That's so weird. No one ever asks me about that. And that was literally such an intricate part of my life. We had to partner and be compelling with no budget. So everything we did was guerrilla. And by the way, I was promoted way too young Mallory, you're going to see, I'll talk about anything. I walked into a meeting and they handed me, I got promoted twice, once because my manager left in the middle of the night and the other one because my new manager died. And so now I was a director of a public company with a global team that the person closest to age was 11 years my senior and had been with the company for 7 years. I had been with the company 7 months. Okay. And they're like, okay, here's your they just handed me, they're like, here you go. And I looked down and it said P&L. And I took it as penal. And so I went into a meeting with a bunch of executives and I said, does anybody want to go over the penal? Very matter of fact. And thank God, they thought I was joking, because what dumbass says something they literally were like, new girl's got jokes anyway. And I was like, okay, that was fine. Okay. Note to self. There wasn't internet. There wasn't LinkedIn. There wasn't SEO. There wasn't Google. There wasn't, you couldn't go find any of these things. Anybody that you went to go ask, they were vying for your job. Mm-hmm. You weren't trying to be like, oh, excuse me, new girl needs help. So it was fun for me, Mallory. It was fun because you know what? I had some jobs I had no budget and it was everything was just weird for me. Okay. It was here's our marketing budget. Great. How much ROI are you expecting to get from that? And they're like, wait, what? And I was I was like, wait, am I in the twilight zone? Yeah. Marketing is not tied to sales. Wait, well, how do you know if you did a good job in marketing?
Okay, wait, this is like one of my most fundamental questions of the universe. How do you know?
Right. And I'm like, well, okay. I'm like, you should, I mean, like, I literally walked around for 5 years. Like I was medicated because I was like, am I in an alternate universe? Like how do you know if you do a good job? Like, how do you know what program worked? How do you know what alliance worked? How do you know what to improve on? And they're like, oh, you're so cute. And I'm like, no, it really like because it was a real question until I got older and more like, yeah, that's super cute, Mallory. I know. Come sit with me and walk me through it. Like, explain it to me. Like before, I was like, oh crap, I ask really stupid questions. Like, so it was hard. And then finally, I said, you guys, look, here's the deal. I'm not doing it anymore. If you want me to stay and you want me to be effective and you want me to be good, then I need to understand what I'm doing. So I create the right team and I develop the right programs. And they were like, okay, well, we don't want Stephynie to be mad. So go ahead. And it was the first time, like Silicon Graphics, I had a $2 million budget. We tied $6 million to revenue in a year. Like, wow. And they were like, oh, did you want to write a newsletter? I'm like, what's a newsletter? Like, what does that even mean? I did my job. So, so alliances I'm passionate, like co-development, co-technology. I wrote the you're like 5 years old and super beautiful, but I wrote the largest partnership for monster.com ever in history. Like, I know you don't know what that is. It's now Indeed.
I do. I'm not as young as you think I am.
We did a co-development, co-technology deal. It was $44 million. My boss couldn't get it closed. And I was like, give me a shot. And he was like, oh, you're so cute. And I was like, no, really, like, give me a shot. Like, I feel like you guys are leaving a lot of stuff on the table. Like, people don't know you. They don't like you. They don't trust you. You're not foundational. They think you're going to write this and leave. And now he's the CEO at Splunk. And he's like, you were completely right. I closed a $44 million co-technology deal for workforce optimization tool before nobody even knew what workforce optimization was. So yeah, we can talk about alliances. We can talk about
let's just keep going. Yeah, let's just keep going. Okay. Cause I want to hear about this. So, because I think there is something about how your brain works that I have always gravitated towards. I'm just like, I don't know, but I feel like I see things similarly to you in certain ways, and how I think about nonprofit partnerships and like cross-sector partnerships, and have been asking so many of the same questions, especially since building my own business. Like, okay, like I get it, marketing, but like, what are you being evaluated on? Or like when a nonprofit is going to build a relationship with a marketing department, I'm like, what is the ROI that you need to see? How can we demonstrate that we are a good partner to you? Because we want to keep doing this year after year. Yeah. And we really want to understand, like, how do we build something that is meaningful to you? And sometimes folks know, especially now in the day where you can track things a lot differently than you could when you're talking about, right? It's like marketing has really changed in that way, but there's still so much to me that feels like this code that I'm like, does anybody know this? Like, what does brand align? How do you measure brand alignment and the value there? And so I just want to hear more about even this like partnership, and sort of like, how did you see all the untapped potential there?
I mean, Mallory, I don't know how many podcasts you've heard me on. Like, I want to come up with this like really super beautiful, flowery, like epic. Oh my God, no way. I don't know why. And let me backtrack a little bit. I spent my 20s and 30s wondering what was wrong with me. Like, I was like, I don't like those. Like, we would be in board meetings or venture capital meetings, or we would be in alliance meetings, big companies, big ones, Scient, Viant, Clarify, PeopleSoft, Oracle, Nike, American Express, Motorola, Telstra, Ford, Toyota. No companies that you haven't heard of. And I felt like all of the executives who, were MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, and then me, I felt like none of the questions really, I didn't understand what they were asking. Like, how is that, like, to your point, how is that building? Like, I literally here's what I did, Mallory. I walked into a room and I went like this. Which one do you want? And everybody was like, that's the questions that they would ask. And I was like, you haven't even asked Mallory, how long has she been with the company? Is this the first job that she's had in this position? What did she expect that's exactly the same that she was that she was expecting? Or what did she think was going to happen at this job that hasn't happened? What's keeping her up at night? What's her talent strategy? Like, I ask questions that are not about my service, because I want to know where your head is. I want to know where your heart is. I want to understand where you're aligned. And I mean, after the first couple of questions, because it's rocky, I'm not going to lie, they're like, and my CFO has told me for 20 years, I'm an HR nightmare, because I'll be like, oh my gosh, I love your hair. What nationality are you? And he's like, no, no. And I was like, okay, hi, where do your parents live? Where did they come from? Like, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just really want a connection with you. And if I don't, you also know that very quickly. So I would hear these people asking questions, but they weren't asking questions, Mallory, like, hey, Mallory, what's your measurement for success? What hasn't worked? What have you tried that you love that's no longer available to you? And I would ask these questions and everybody would just sit back. And I'm telling you, it was so uncomfortable. Like, Mallory, I'm not kidding. Okay. Like they would go, and the silence felt like it was like 13 years. It was like 20 seconds, but they were like, oh, hey, that's a really good question. And then I would be like, great. Like, did anybody want to answer it now? Like, I just, throwing it out there. Well, one of the things I realized about this was people didn't know their own measurement of success. They didn't know how to be measurable and accountable themselves. So going to partner with somebody was incredibly difficult. The partner was successful if they gave you their brand, their logo, their brand alignment document. And I would get these documents. Thank goodness I was so new or like naive or whatever you want to call it. Cause I'd be like, oh, awesome. That's great. What's this for? It's not talking about the partnership. It's not talking about the alliance. It's not talking about how you show up, Mallory. How do you show up? What do you show up with? What do I show up with? If we're going to bake a cake or we're going to build a menu, you come with things and I come with things. There was none of that. And it was so natural for me to be so curious about that. And the looks I would get would be like, what is she doing? And then deal after deal after deal started closing. Here's the differentiator. Whenever I would close the deal, I would give this flip people out. I can't tell you how many times I got written up for it. I would give you a 30-day grace period to get out of it because I wanted you to want to marry me. I wanted to show up for you and let you know I'm not changing anything. By the way, Mallory, if there's anything you want to change about this document, like as we start working together on Monday, if there's anything you want to change about this, or maybe if there's anything that you think we could do better, let's revisit it in 20 days. And you would go, great. You know how many documents changed? None. People felt safe. They felt like you were there to build, not sell. You were there to solution, not gouge, not make money, not walk away. I love the people that say, I'm sorry, that's not my team. My team is new accounts. And now you're passed over to an in-house service team. If you're mine forever. People don't see it like that. So that's why I was always a little different.
Okay. I love it because now I'm covered in chills. And but I was like, once in a while for this podcast, I just like have this very weird hit where I'm just like, I know I have to talk to this person. Like even with not a ton of information. And that is how I felt about you. And now it's so clear why, because we have so many similarities actually, even in our like stories around kind of like early promotion and feeling like kind of the person in the room that didn't know the language that everyone else was using and relying on a lot of curiosity and kind of wonder to figure things out. Or like, it sounds like you were like me too, where I was just like, am I just doing this really wrong? Like, I don't know. But also you said my favorite question in the world, which is like, what keeps you up at night? And so the thing that has been really different for me as I've built a like framework for building cross-sector partnerships is like having organizations lead with that question, because I'm like, who cares about a logo on a table tent at your event? What value is that creating in the world? How is that really supporting your mission, that $2,500 sponsorship of that event? And how is that really supporting the partner? It's not. There's no real value there. And so how can we help each other like solve the problems that are keeping both of us up at night? Like we can do so much better than that logo placement. And I just have like always fiercely believed that. And I've watched the same thing too, like being on calls with marketing folks, especially with the nonprofit lens, where I think like so often they're like, okay, you're just going to ask me for money, and leaning in and being like, tell me like, what are your biggest pain points? What's keeping you up at night? And just like the way they relax, like lean in. So many of them have said things like, no one's ever asked me that before. And I've been so shocked by that. Like
it's almost like a clock. It's almost like click, go. And then they go, blah, 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 and they're just like pitching. And you're like, like it's for me, it just feels so disingenuous. I mean, honestly, Mallory, I got written up when I was younger. I got written up like maybe 10 times because I would go in and meet with somebody and I didn't ask them for the sale. And my boss was doing a ride along and I'm just like, they don't need us. or we're too small or we're too big or, hey, I really feel like they need a conversation more than like a platform or a software or a SaaS solution. They just need, it's just different. They're like, but you could have sold. Yeah, I could have sold. And I sell in Silicon Valley, and how big is Silicon Valley and how incestual is Silicon Valley? I'd rather keep the relationship. I'd rather be top of mind for you to call to go, hey, Steph, do you know anybody in this space? Or, hey, I'm really struggling here. Can we have a conversation? It's not always about the sale. It's about the solution. And to your point about the logo placement, that's a big, huge pet peeve for me. I feel like it doesn't happen. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm like completely fine being wrong. For me, whenever I was younger and I was doing these alliances constantly, people weren't so aware. The buyer or the partner wasn't necessarily super savvy. So they didn't realize that maybe you paid for that logo. They're like, oh, they partnered, cute. But I remember, I'll never forget this in a million years. And I know Mark. So I know Mark Benioff from Salesforce. And I'll never forget when somebody reached out to me, my previous consulting firm that I started. And they said, we'd like to partner with you. And hi, this is so-and-so from Salesforce. We'd like to partner with you. And I'm like, and it's so funny. Everybody in my office is like, oh God, they're so dumb. And they like disperse because they're like, oh, watch Stephynie inhale Salesforce. It's going to be so fun. I say, oh, tell me what you'd like to partner on. And they're like, oh. I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. One more time. And they're like, oh, all of your software needs, like all of it. And I was like, okay. Do you know how big my organization is? And they would say something like, yes, like right under 60,000 people. And I'd be like, yeah, no, I think it's actually interesting. You actually need to go back to the drawing board and do better research. And a lot of the times I was really nice. Like a lot of the times there are also times that I wasn't, where I was like, you call me and say you want to partner. What's my business? How do you know you want to partner? Do I have liens? Do I pay my bills? Am I nice to my partners? Am I kind? Do I have a giant turnover? Like, what do you want to partner with? Because what I feel like is you want to sell me a bunch of stuff I don't need. And I told Mark, Frank Van Veenendaal was my previous boss at another company. He was the president of Salesforce for a long time. I was like, have your people do better. Like, I want to partner is not acceptable. What do they want to partner with me in? And do you have an affordable thing I wasn't 60,000. I was 16, like 16 people globally dispersed. Like, where's your information coming from? And I just feel like we need to show up a lot more intentionally, because logo placement is not a partnership. That's not a partnership. That's a bought sign. That's what
it's
that is.
It's a vendor relationship.
Exactly. That's all it is.
I totally agree. I mean, I think like clarity around why you want to partner, really seeing the other person and being specific and not some like scatter-fired approach to like, I think what's so interesting actually about what you're talking about, I think, is also kind of the flip side of being really trustworthy. My guess is they also were reaching out to you like that because they trusted you because of your reputation of being a good partner in the other ways. And so perhaps they didn't even do their due diligence because they're just like, well, I know we'll figure it out with her at some point. She is like a trustworthy person that we could figure these pieces out with. And so it's interesting because I wonder, like, while I totally agree with you, I think it also speaks to like the kind of like word of mouth, like way you represent yourself attracts people who are willing to come into maybe more like fluid or like nebulous situations because they're like, I just really trust that we're going to find a match here somehow with you and that you're going to be really honest along the way when there isn't alignment. And that's so rare, I think, to find in some of these spaces that people are just like, yeah, whatever you do, we want to do it because we'd rather talk to you about that than kind of be out in the ocean, not having a clue if what people are saying is what they're doing or any of those things.
And so you make a really good point, Mallory, because here's the thing. That's actually how I started my coaching business, because I would have these, no offense at all to the younger ones at all, like no offense, but I was like, you're going to get inhaled. Like if you get an executive on a bad day and you come with, I want to partner with you, you're going to get inhaled. Like let's figure out how you show up better. Let's figure out your executive presence. Let's figure out your pitch to not make it sound pitchy. Let's figure out your provocative questions. How do you show up? What are you looking for? And I probably could have been a little easier. I probably could have. I think if my team was here, they would have been like, you think? But I would say, hey, why don't you come into the office, or why don't you, grab coffee? Let's come in for a 20-minute conversation. And they would get there and I'd be like, don't ever call me without having the right research. I'd rather you say, I don't know, or I don't have it, then come with, like, I had somebody try and sell me consulting services. And I'm like, oh, so interesting. You want to partner? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what do I do? And they're like, I'm like, so you're asking me to partner with you and your firm does consulting services? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, tell me more. And they're like, okay. And they start going through all the things that they consult in. And I started asking them for metrics, and they have really strong metrics. So the deal is I could have partnered with them, but they didn't even know what I did. And so it's like, when you show up, instead of calling 100 cold calls, do 10 and know them really well, because they're going to remember how you made them feel. They're going to feel safe. They're going to feel like they matter. They're going to feel secure. They're going to feel open. They're going to feel wanting to share. They're going to find a way to partner. By the way, go look up that word and then let me know what you did wrong. And they did. They did. And it was great, because partnering is hard. It's like marriage. It's like sometimes you want to be in it and sometimes you don't, but you have to stick through it and really kind of see the other side.
So I am obsessed with you.
Says no one ever. Can I have that in a sound clip, please? Because I'm just going to keep playing that right now and be like, Mallory said.
Just loop it.
Mallory said she's obsessed with me.
So, because actually, I think you're talking about this other thing that I have been thinking about constantly recently, which is like, there's this misconception, or there's this perception in the nonprofit sector that trust takes a long time to build. And so there's this idea of this long partnership period or long funder period, right? They're like, oh, you need 12 to 18 months to cultivate a major donor or a corporate partner or any of these things. And that has not been true in my experience. And when I've really thought about what it's taken to close, 6-figure deals in a 50-minute phone call, what I think it is actually a lot of what you talked about. How can you build trust in that 50 minutes to make it clear you really see them, you really understand their business goals, you're really committed, you're not going to have some term sheet that can never be adjusted, right? Like, I've done so many similar things, but I never really consciously necessarily realized it. And I was on a call recently, I was coaching like a group of 15 folks, and I just said to them, it was the end of the call, it was like 55 minutes in, and I was like, how many of you trust me right now? And they all raised their hands. And I was like, so why do we believe that it takes so long inside the sector to build trust? It's because we are showing up inauthentically with our needs front and center. We are not taking the time to get to know people or build aligned partnerships to achieve shared goals. That's what then takes of course, that's going to take you 18 months if you're not connecting, but you can connect and do all of those things in 50 minutes.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's important to tell your listeners as well. And I didn't do a good job researching who your listeners are. I think one of the things that I would say too is also to don't be emotionally tied to the goal. Walk away. I can't tell you how many times I say no. It doesn't happen as much anymore. And I think because people have gotten to really know me online, and they're like, oh, if I ask that question, I'd be really better be prepared for the answer. But I'm like, you're creepy. You look away. You're not looking in my eyes. You're not hearing all the things that I'm not saying. If you really go up to my website and click work with me now, and I'll see what I can do, but I'm not going to just sit here and pour into you, because I don't feel like you even believe in what you're doing. And I'm not going to buy or solution or partner with anybody who doesn't believe from their soul what they're doing. I'm not going to do it. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I actually told somebody, I said, what are you doing? And she said, what do you mean? I said, you hate this job. And she literally turned bright red and she burst into tears. And she said, I had to do university online, and my scholarship or my merit award didn't go through. And she said, and so unless I go back to class in person, which she's like, both my parents are at risk, I have to pay for it myself. And I said, stop everything. And I said, let's just spend 20 minutes. And she was sobbing. And in 48 hours, she had a new job that she liked and she believed in. And I said, you have to ask sometimes. You have to tap out and you have to say, I know it's not landing with you. I'm looking at you. I'm kind of over my skis. I'm kind of not feeling this right now. Reach out, ask somebody, be genuine in everything that you do. Even if you don't love what you're doing or you feel nervous about what you're doing, talk about that. People want to connect, and they want genuine connection. Most people want it lifelong, unless they're not sketchy. Unless they are sketchy.
No, totally. And, I think my background is in the nonprofit sector. I became an accidental fundraiser, like so many leaders in this sector. You just get promoted up. up, come with big fundraising responsibilities, wildly uncomfortable thing to do, like in your mid-20s and asking for millions of dollars. And especially with the way our society like wires beliefs about money and self-worth and value and philanthropy. And there was no space to talk about any of that. So I'd never felt like I had permission to say, gosh, I'm uncomfortable. Like, I'm so nervous to sit down with you right now. No, right? It would have been like, I would have been definitely fired.
Right. For sure. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Mallory, it gets to a point and you're really good. Like you're really, really good at this. Like you're really good at building rapport. You're really good at engaging. You're great. You're natural. There's going to get to a point where you're like on for 5 minutes and you're like, yeah, no, thank you so much. Like I really, really appreciate it.
Okay, so tell me how you hold those boundaries, because I think you're right that I know that, but getting off that discovery call even that fast. It's funny with funders, I've done it. I have said 5 minutes into a meeting, wow, it is so cool to hear about what you're doing. That actually isn't what this organization is focused on right now, but I would love to make an introduction to you to another organization. That has like felt interesting, probably because of the power dynamic of the money in that situation. Mm-hmm. But like with a business call or something, either way, whether they're interested in a service from me, and I'm like, it's definitely not a fit. Or the other way, I'm like, it's like a date. God, I never walked out of a date in 5 minutes, even though I knew, I still sat there.
Oh yeah, no, I walk out.
I love it. Tell me how. Tell me your secrets.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. So, it's really funny that you say that because I just screamed at one of my business partners like last week, and we just had this conversation, and I'll tell you about that in a second. You'll just cry laughing. So it depends on here's the thing. There's two things. It's not a good fit. You're a good person, and it's not a good fit. You're not a good person. Okay. And you can draw those narratives in your head. If they're a good person, if they're not. And so I think it's different. So for me, I say no 80% of the time. I kill myself for my clients. So the way that my business works is I have 3 lines of business. Okay. I have business consulting. So think of, is it the right audience? How do you know it's the right audience? Is it the right service? How do you know it's the right service? What's your next what's your emerging market? So what's your next either technology or what's your next service or what's your next product? How do you know that that's in demand? Okay. What's your talent strategy? What's your revenue goals? Like that business consulting, pure business consulting. That's I've done 4 million to 4 billion. So I didn't mean to have that big of a play because I feel like if you serve everyone, you serve no one, like I really feel like that. But the people that have moved up that I've worked with, they are now running $1 billion corporations. So I have that experience. The second thing is high impact performance coaching. And those people, those are my people. I am literally in the most uncomfortable situations with you. Like I'm right here. Like I'm right here. Like I'm like, Mallory, why'd you say that? Mallory, did you see the way she looked at you? Mallory, it's like hysterical because I'm with you for your clients. I'm with you for your friends. I'm with you for your mate. I'm with you for your company and your peers and your executives. And I'm going pivot, tweak, pivot, tweak, pivot, tweak. I take 3 of those a year, only 3. That's it. It's a global position. So I'm flying to Singapore with you and Australia with you, and I'm flying to Ireland with you. I'm like your shadow. Okay. And at the end of that time, you are 40 to 60% higher in revenue, higher in growth, or higher in talent retention. Guaranteed. And most of the time it's been 75%. Okay. And then there's crisis, and crisis is money laundering, bid rigging, skimming, everything, college admissions scandal, anything financial, white collar, any infidelity, any of those high impacts. So think of the people that are the most highly visible that automatically get on TV or paparazzi. We've had 39 clients and only 1 has ever gotten to media, ever. Wow. Massively huge, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, or, 4 babies and a wife with 4 different women, but that's a whole other story. And the biggest thing is it's discernment, Mallory. It's discernment. So if I know right now, and I know like in 5 minutes, I will very politely say, hey, Mallory, you're coming to me with this problem, but we haven't addressed the pain. So your back hurts, but you're not willing to not sit so long. So I have somebody who's going to meet you exactly where you are, who's probably most likely local to you. And I think that they can work out a lot of the kinks before you kind of move to the next level. And so that's you're a good person, you're a good human. You just are not a right fit. Okay. You are an arrogant jerk, or you believe that you're something that you're not. I will literally say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. But you know what? I have realized I don't have any desire to waste any more of your time, and I would never take you as a client. And then they're like, wait, what? What did I? And I said, so let's unpack that for a second. Do you think like I'm probably wrong. I'm probably the wrong one. Do you get feedback that you're a great person? Like, does your wife or does your husband think you're amazing? Like, are your kids calling just to check in? Like on your employee reviews, and they're like, okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
And I mean, sometimes it's bad. Like I've gotten bad posts on LinkedIn. I've gotten to where, I've been trying to reach Stephynie. I got one last week. I've clicked the work with me button for Stephynie 4 times and she never calls me back. There's selfies that are shirtless. There's like, I have so much money. Can you meet me on my yacht in Monaco? And I'm like, you know what? My husband and I were just talking about taking that trip. Yes, we will totally meet you there. Here's the itinerary. So you can't take yourself too seriously. You have to just be really strong in who you are, your values, your morals, and you're going to draw those people in. But you do not waste 1 second talking to clowns. Don't do it. Be like, go. And don't be referring clowns to other people because that's how we get a bad ecosystem. So just say, no, you're not what I want.
I think that's so great because probably half the listeners are actually like consultants in the nonprofit or social impact space. So I think that is actually great framing. And something you said before around for like the good people, wrong fit, and sort of like who are the upstream or downstream solutions around your business or nonprofit. I think that's so important. And I've been trying to figure that out for my like business, like sort of who isn't ready yet for me and where should they go first, or like who needs more hand holding than my business provides. And sort of like, what is the ecosystem? And I think for nonprofits, that's a really like missed opportunity. A lot of the time is to network and not necessarily collaborate programmatically, but be a bit of that referral service. I think there's so much like scarcity mindset in the nonprofit sector that they just want to take partnership and money at all costs sometimes. And, we have this like donor retention rate number that's sort of constantly at play in the sector. And it's like, anywhere from like 45 to 55%, depending on the source and year or whatever. Right. There's a part of me that's like, God, there are a few things I've been challenging around that thinking. One is, that number drives everyone crazy. Part of me is like, maybe that number is fine. Like maybe it's actually fine to think that 50% of the people who give are the right partners for you, are aligned partners, and 50% are going to give because their friend invited them to, or because they went to this event this one time, or because they're connected to it one time through somebody else. And that felt good and was meaningful, but they aren't your people. So like, don't waste your time trying to like continue to align yourself with them when they're not aligned, but they did that nice thing and they supported that one time. Like maybe that's fine, right? And perhaps if we were more intentional throughout our entire fundraising process around identifying and aligning with the right partners, that number would change. But hounding the lapsed donors is actually not the solution to that.
So I love every single aspect of that. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 things. Have you ever heard of Mind Mup?
No.
Listeners, okay, Mind Mup. So I'm going to tell you how to do this. So there's this. I think I'm so dumb when it comes to stuff like this. Like I'm like I literally scream for my daughter and be like, Mind Mup, pull it up. So Mind Mup it's a Google thing. It's called Mind Mup. Okay. Think of it as a word bubble. Think of it as a like data dump. Okay. So when I was doing my business and I wanted to invite only the people that I knew, like I know Mallory, if I send you a text message and I'm like, Mallory, I know it's 11 o'clock at night, but I really need you to talk to this person. I'm not going to have to coach you on talking to that person. I know you're going to ask the right person, the right questions, and you're going to report back to me. That was a great fit. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Or you're going to be like, hey, Steph, they were really, really good. They're in an area of my business I haven't built out. I referred him to this person. Okay. Either way, I'm going to get that feedback. So what I do is I put my core pillars in the middle of this circle. Okay. And whatever they are, like, again, I'm not going to go through this because I have 3 lines of business. So just think about what your core is. So maybe your core is, great business alignment and you've built that out to whatever that is. Okay. So every 80% on the same page. And then you go through, like, I really want to focus on women. Okay. I really want to focus on, single moms, or I really want to focus on universities, whatever that core is in the middle, whatever your pillars are. Mine are empathy. Mine are connection. I have 10 of them. Mine are grace. Mine are super solid EQ skills, self-awareness, self-actualization, really, really deep-seated skills. And then you have to be honest and have deep integrity. I don't care what your story is. I don't care how bad it is. There's nothing you can say to me. I don't care. But you have to be the one telling me your story. I don't want to read it in a newspaper or hear it from a husband or a wife or a victim or whatever it is. Okay. So once I know what I'm doing, I'm like, who in that, forget their services, who would connect with that I wouldn't have to waste too much of my time. So like, I know Mallory's going to get it. I know Shonda would get it. I know Erica would get it. Mike won't get it. He'll take forever to explain. I can't do that right now. And I start doing the people, not the service. Okay. Then I go, okay, what service do they provide? Even if it's just warmth, even if it's grace, even if it's connection, whatever it is, I'm like, oh gosh, Mallory shows up like this. Like Mallory's punctual. Mallory knows everybody in this area. And I start kind of mapping it out from there. Okay. And then I have a really good alignment of resources. So I call you and I'm like, hey, Mallory, I need like a first line of defense. I'm traveling way too much. Could you take, how many new clients could you possibly take? And you're like, oh, you know what? I'm open right now. I could do 6. And then you're like, Steph, make sure they're not too low level. So maybe they're $1 million of revenue or above, but make sure that they're not 25 or over because I feel like I would be not. Okay, whatever. And then I ask you, can you think of 2 people that you would pass them off to? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. Deborah and John. Okay. And then all of a sudden I just add those things and my list is like this big and I know the services. It takes a day, maybe 2. When you see your network and like pretty messy colors and you're like, oh my gosh, and it clicks for you and it makes so much sense, you feel so much stronger to show up and advise based on who you know on top of what you know. Okay. So that's number 1. Okay. Number 2, for donors, I survey the heck out of everybody. Like I won't even take your money. I'm not even going to take your money. Like, I want to know what's important to you. I want to know, do you like your kids? Do you not like your kids? You know how many people actually answer that question and they're fine with it? They're like, they were really great till they hit 21. And now they're, not so much. I'm like, oh my gosh, me too. Crazy. So you develop that connection with them. Okay. But I survey them. What would make you stay? What would make you go? What would light you up so much that you would want to give more? And I do these little tiny things along the way. Like, for example, somebody goes, oh, you know what? If you did a scholarship for, Afghanistan women, okay, I will send them like a donation that we've made to Afghanistan schools. And I will say, would you like to do a quote for me in this? I bring them into my circle. So when they decide not to donate, they're leaving the relationship. They're leaving the care that they've gotten. If you just show up and ask them for money, they just feel like a source, like they're just a bank. They don't feel connected to the cause. Why do it? What's the point? You want them to feel so connected to you and what you're doing. And then you want to say, hey, John, how do I do better? What would have made you say yes faster? What did I miss? Like, what are the things that I didn't cover that you go, gosh, I really felt like that would be natural for you to cover? What are those things? I'm telling you, Mallory, when I do these things, I have to like spend so much time talking about it because they want to share what would make that experience better for them.
And there are some nuances in your questions, I think, that also provoke that level of interest, right? Like, what lights you up versus why do you give to us? Or, or like what made, like, just there's these small changes to the way that you're saying things that are inviting people to think bigger, right? And I think that is building that connection, just like with what's keeping you up at night. It's like, oh, I can tell you, you want to know, like and really from like a point of connection. I love that you said empathy first, because like when you were talking about the mind map.
Okay. I said, I'm like mind map, and they're like, no, mind map. I'm like, that's so weird.
But like that you said empathy first, because that is also just a theme I've been thinking about so much related to how we work in the nonprofit sector, because I think empathy so often gets sort of confused for like sympathy, or right. We're like, oh, we're the most empathetic in the nonprofit sector, right? We like care so much, but it's not true. Like, I actually think in the nonprofit sector, in many ways, we are the least empathetic because we get such tunnel vision around the scarcity mindset and the survival mode in the sector that it's so hard for us to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And we even have like a lot of kind of conflicting energy to do it with our funders, because we're like, why do I need to imagine what their life is like? Like, they have the money, we don't have the money. And they sort of set up this like impenetrable kind of ability to like sit in the other person's shoes and be like, look, everyone has things that are keeping them up at night. And
absolutely.
right. And things that light them up. And if you're ever going to figure out who you're really aligned with, you have to go there. It's not going to be on some like one pager of your organization that's going to give you any look into like who someone is.
No. And the other thing is too, Mallory, I would just fire them. I would just be like, you don't belong in this organization because you're reading from a script. I want you to care. Like, I don't want you to call somebody who's going to donate to us. Like, I ask the craziest questions. Like, I'm like, okay, like, let's just have a conversation because I feel like we're going to be friends forever. Okay. When was the last time you like laughed, like belly laughed, like laughed out loud? And they're like, oh, and then they'll say, when I was in Portugal, I was blah, blah, blah at this place. And then you're like, oh my gosh, Portugal, I've been there. And they're like, oh, I'm from there. And then you start building a natural connection, but you have to ask them a question you really, really care about. Today, somebody asked me a question on my team. She's super young. And we were interviewing a podcast guest who was so wildly inappropriate. Like, I could not believe, she was so inappropriate, but I couldn't stop laughing because I was like, this is like a real thing. Like, she's really saying this, like, this is crazy. And so she said something very, very inappropriate. And there wasn't a pause. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to, like I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And it was so inappropriate. Okay. But I couldn't stop laughing. Like, when we got off the phone, our executive producer, she was looking at me and I was crying. I was laughing so hard. And she's like, I've never seen you laugh. So I'm like, who says those things? Like, this is crazy. She's like, and so I kept trying to say it. I kept trying to say the words that she was saying and I couldn't say it. Like, I was laughing so hard. And so you think about those things and think about when was the last time you truly laughed like out loud? Or, Mallory, have you lost anybody in the pandemic? And then they're like, well, yes, but no. And then they'll tell you a story. People want to share. Nobody asks them these questions. These are all pent up inside of them. You want them to give money. How many other people are asking them for money? How many other people have done better research than you've done? How many other people are vying for that slot? And if that person's a good person, are they agonizing? Like, what if the donation doesn't go to what they say? What if the organization gets closed down for like money laundering or fraud? What if their organization, and like, think about all of the things that their name is tied to and how hard they've worked to make this money. They have a lot going on in there. Tax benefits. They have all of their business people and their financial people telling them who to invest in and who to fund and all of these. They're as overwhelmed as you are in getting it. They're that overwhelmed in giving it. So to be empathetic and really understand where they're coming from, but asking super thought-provoking, genuine questions. Somebody asked me today, they're like, hey, how many kids do you have? And I'm like, 14. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, 4, but today it feels like 14 and then they were like, oh my gosh, I thought you really had 14 kids. I was like, yeah. I'm like, I look good though, right? Like, I'm looking and they were dying and they're like, it went in a completely different direction where asking for money or talking about wealth was not hard or difficult. It was how I showed up, not them.
Oh my God. And that's like, we know even from the science. I had Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett on another episode and we talked about kind of like the way we calibrate our like energy with each other. And just like how much, there's so many like coaching principles that the science, you interviewed Dr. Ethan Cross too. And, like there's so many things that are so related, like between and sort of just have different terms or frameworks for understanding. And so I love that like science-backed research and like the whole like kind of like energy attracts like energy and like just meeting someone where they're at, that doesn't mean necessarily like you ask that question. Not even necessarily, obviously you ask that question about like losing someone in the pandemic. And then you're like, I'm going to be super high energy for this conversation and totally like miss meeting that person where they're at right now. Right. But like going there with them and then recognizing that you do have a certain amount of control over sort of the energy and the tone in the conversation. So where you go depends on your energy and your comfort level and all of those things.
I've gone so far as to, and by the way, in a very desperate situation, like again, being completely transparent in a very, very desperate situation, I have gotten on a call before and I've noticed somebody's very preoccupied. Like I've noticed that and I stopped the call. And I'm like, you know what, Mallory, I have no desire to be another added stress on your to-do list. And I can just tell by your presence, I've watched you enough in your content and I've watched you enough, like speaking to people. I know you're distracted. I can't imagine what is going on for you. Would you mind if we rescheduled so you could take some time and actually just reflect on what's going on for you to take care of that? And they are literally like, and I was like, and they'll do it. They'll be like, first of all, they're freaked out because they're like, how did you know? Oh my God, do you think I showed up on all the calls like this today? And then Right. And then it turns into a coaching session, but no judgment. I'm like, you know what? Probably not. But, I'm a body language expert and, I really focus on all the things that are not being said. So probably everybody's so involved in their own life that they're not really paying close attention to you. And I don't want to start our relationship off like that. I want you to know that you're seen, you're felt, you're heard, and I want to build and gain trust. And that wouldn't be very kind of me if I started a relationship knowing that your brain is somewhere else. And it's literally like cell phone friends for the rest of your life. Like they're like, hey, I was thinking about, can you speak here? Is there any way we can collaborate on this? I was thinking about you for that. And it's such an honor to make people feel so calm and settled and still just by paying attention to them. That was all I did. Nothing cost money. Was I out a little bit of time? Yeah, but was I really? Because how good would the conversation have been if we just kept going down this road? I just gave them 45 minutes to an hour back and I was able to complete some work and we have something on the book scheduled. And the biggest thing is I showed up compassionate and empathetic for what they were going through. That's the relationship. That's the trust.
Okay, so there are two things I'm curious about. One is how you set yourself up for success to hold a container like that. Like, what are some of the tools that you use to be able to fully arrive to all of these scenarios without any of your own stuff, right? Because if you're like, well, I don't know when I could reschedule this because I'm so busy and blah, 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 right? Then you're probably less able to really hold the space to say, make it fully about them, which you do clearly. So how do you sort of protect your own energy and space around that stuff?
Yeah, I kind of suck at that. I really just do. Like I told you, I'm not going to BS. So my main priority in life is being a mom. Okay. That's my main priority in my life. It's in my contract. So there in my contract, if I have to fly for you immediately, expect that you're paying for 2 other flights because my kids come with me. I didn't have my children to have a nanny. I had my children to have children. I'm first generation here. My mom was born in Portugal. My dad was born in the Middle East. So kids and my family are very, very important to me. Very important. With that being said, I think not having time is BS. I think then you don't manage your time effectively. I am a tad bit of a Nazi. I'm not going to lie. I don't watch TV. I don't scroll. I just found out what viral meant. I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, virus? What are you talking about? Like, oh God, not virus, viral. Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm like, you're right. Exactly. Penal. Like, I don't know. And these things are just not important to me. Yeah. Relationships, care, trust, building something amazing, asking great and disruptive questions is important. So how do I protect my energy and time? I generally won't schedule anything first thing in the morning that is not already a client. Okay. Like I won't schedule a podcast. I won't schedule a Forbes panel. I won't schedule like a TV thing, anything like that, because my son will always walk in the door and he will be like, hey, Mallory, how's it going? You're beautiful. Like, do you have a boyfriend? Like, I'm just wondering if you have a boyfriend, and I know that that's what he's going to do. No matter what consequence I offer him, that is what he's going to do. Okay. So I don't do that. So I will generally try and say, hey, Mallory, just so you know, our next conversation, I'm probably going to be in the car. I'm going to be at a soccer practice, but I want you to know I'll be completely focused on you. So there's dead time built in my schedule for something else that I'm going to slot you into if it's convenient for you. That's number one. Number two, probably the answer you were trying for whenever I'm going to tell you about this. This drives my daughter. I have a 26-year-old who's just incredibly beautiful in everything that she does. She's nothing like me. She's creative. She's sweet. She's stops and looks at butterflies and flowers and she notices everything. And she's the best photographer. She's director of creative. So she does all of our social. She does all of our pictures. Wow. She does all of our videos. She's great. Okay. I don't do any of that. I'm like spreadsheet, map, strategy. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. It drives her insane. She has been in the car with me when I have gotten the most crazy clients. So the FBI has called or the CIA has called or a client has called and said, they've stole $150 million or, they're being tagged for embezzlement or, hey, the FBI just came through my door. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm talking just like this. I'm like, okay, so where are you? Where's the spouse and the children? So where's your wife or where's your husband? Where are the children? That's my biggest priority is to make sure that that's contained. And then we just start going through the questions. So this happens all the time. And my daughter goes, can't you just be a normal mother? I do not understand. This is crazy. And I'm like, honey, it's only crazy if it's my life and my choice. It's not my life and my choice. What happens to the doctors that have to run in and save somebody from a shooting or from a car accident or from a motorcycle accident? You can't get emotionally involved with everything that was not saying that somebody dying was their choice, but somebody else's choices. You're there to contain. You're there to calm. You're there to show your expertise and your perspective. Me flipping out is not going to help you. It's not my choice. It's not my decision. So I just go, how can I show up the best for Mallory? Mallory needs what? What do you need? You need a sounding board. You need fast acting, immediate resources. You need to see results immediately. You need an action plan, and you need people to contain the situation as fast, quietly, as discerning as possible. Me yelling back at you, me crying back at you, me going, how'd you do this, Mallory? I can't believe you got yourself. Like, who wants that? Like, call your mom. Like, that's not going to be, so it doesn't feel like it's my thing to contain. You're hiring me for a job to consult with you on your business or a crisis. I'm not going to flip out on it. I'm going to say, I can help you and you're going to fly, or I can't help you, but let me find somebody who can. So those are kind of the two things where I don't, it's not my choice. It's not my life. My life is over here helping.
I think it's just a really incredible example of, something I try to practice, but I think struggle with sometimes is like opening myself up to sort of the care and empathy on one side, but then holding that distance from the emotional investment or engagement or drama, right? It's this constant balance of like, yes, I obviously deeply care about you. That's why I've taken you on, and I care about what you're doing. And yeah, I'm not getting caught up in your drama because that's not my drama. Like, I'm here to provide space outside of the drama and clarity outside of the drama. And the moment I'm inside of it with you, we lose all the clarity.
And I think also too, Mallory, one of the other things I would do is I would just ask a lot of questions. I would say, would it help you if I jumped in there with you? Like I just start asking very obvious questions, and they start answering the questions, and they're like horrified. I'm like, I'm not trying to upset. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to gain knowledge. And then the other thing is I'm very clear about three things. Number one, I'm not going to show up more than you're showing up. I'm not going to show up heavier, faster, harder working than you. So I'm going to meet your energy level. That's number one. Number two, here's the three things I do. Okay. If I'm going to grow from it, like if I'm going to exponentially grow, I'm going to do it. Okay. If I'm going to gain accurate knowledge to be able to help somebody else, I'm going to do it. Okay. Or if I'm going to make a ton of money and it's legal and ethical, and ultimately I'll gain that experience to help other people, or I'll be able to donate that astronomical amount of money to something that I really believe in, like sex trafficking, or, like the schools in other countries, or the insane mental health issues that we have here. If I get to donate to that because I spent 20 hours doing X that, was easy for me, or was kind of no big deal, but it was a lot of time, I'm going to do it. So I tell my clients how I'm going to show up. So which one is it? Am I going to learn from you? Am I going to gain tons of knowledge to actually, help somebody else? Or are you going to pay me a crap ton of money? Which is it? And they're like, oh, B, like that's what it's going to be. And I'm like, okay, great. So there's no surprises. We're not guessing. So it's an easy, honest, integrity filled relationship from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This will be my final question, I promise. But I'm so curious about, as you manage all of these like authentic relationships, and your business grows and the network grows and all of these pieces grow, how do you, they have those things around everyone can only hold a certain amount of sort of first circle relationships, second circle relationships, third circle. How do you balance that in terms of also, it sounds like really putting your kids first, and I'm a mom, my daughter's too. And you think about those pieces and then the business piece, like how does it all fit in?
Okay. Again, I suck. I feel like my team, I feel like they called you and they're like, hey, ask these last two questions because these are what she's really bad at. Like, I feel like they just kind of gave you like a little bit too much information. So I don't have a ton of friends. I have 5 friends. I have 3 dear friends that are sisters. They are my blood. They are my family. Those are 20 and 25-year relationships. I might like you. I might be like, oh my God, Mallory, you're super cool. But like, if you're not going to come over and hang out in pajamas, like I'm not a big go out person. I'm introverted by nature. Most people annoy me because they talk about stuff that doesn't matter. It's not going to help their life. It's complaining, or it's critiquing, or it's gossip. And I don't like that. And so I just really kind of felt like I didn't have a ton of close connections like that. My other 2 best friends are guys that I've known since I was 15 years old and 17 years old. So I have 5 solid people. And then, here's the other screwed up, messed up, horrible thing about me. I was a single mom at 21 years old. So I had my daughter at 20. I got married at 21. I had my daughter at 22. I was divorced at 23. I paid him alimony for years, which was insane. And we grew up together. She's my person. Like it's, you take all these weird personality tests and I was like, I'd rather be with her than anyone else in the world. Sorry, honey. But she's just my person. We have the best time together. I mean, we don't have a weird relationship. We don't have that, we're best friends. I'm still mom at the end of the day, no matter what. I don't care about being friends with my kids. God put me here to be their mother, not their friend. So I can just, and she's like, so it's not like that where there's any competition. She's beautiful, sweet, funny, lovely. And she's my person. My husband is my person. Like he's like fun and he's amazing. My little one, and I have 4, but my little one, he's special. He's like the glue to everything. He just, your face hurts after you're done hanging out with him. Cause he's just like, you can't believe that you're like, he's going to be president or he's going to be Stephanie's last client as crisis expert. Like that's where we are with him. So the other things are easy. So, it drove people crazy. Like, you don't have a lot of friends around you. You don't have like a lot of support. I'm not good with coffee conversations. I feel weird. My daughter says, you're such a weirdo. Like, I'm like, where do you get your haircut? Like, I am like, it's so odd. So managing business relationships are easy for me. Somebody talks and they're like, oh, I'm having this. I'm like, oh my God, call Mallory. She's the best. Let me make the intro. Or I spent the last week in New York and I made 7 connections that were like, you literally changed the trajectory of my business. Thank you so much. Those are easy. I know so many people. That's awesome. I probably don't do as good of a job with my second level connections. I probably could do better, but that's just how I manage my life. So that's, I don't know. It's pretty real. Like, it's just, I
really appreciate it, honestly. Cause I also am someone who's like a social introvert or whatever they call it. And I don't know. I'm always like, I don't know the rules either. Like, I don't know how to talk about The Bachelor, or I don't even have normal television. And I just can't do it. I would rather be alone and quiet.
And so that's kind of like the thing. Like my daughter is at a wedding right now and she's like totally laughing at me because she got a +1 and it's not a thing. Like you don't get a +1 unless you're engaged, you have a husband or something like that. And I was like, oh, and she's like, don't even think about it. She's like, you're such a weirdo if you're not talking about business or you're not talking about like how to make somebody millions and millions of dollars or how to not, pop somebody out of jail, mom. You're a weirdo. And I was like, thank you. Like, fine. You go talk about Gucci and Prada and makeup and hair. Like, I don't even.
No, this makes me feel a lot more normal because I said to my husband last weekend, I was like, do I need a hobby or something? Like, I either want to be like doing this or be with you guys. And like, I'm kind of good.
Yeah. I mean, wait till your daughter tells you, mom, get a life. Like my kids are so passive aggressive weird though, because like they begged me to go to their prom. Like I've gone to, so my oldest is 26. The 2 oldest are 25 and 26 and they're girls. I went to both of their proms and they were like, you're working, right? Or they'll go, hey, can I have a party? And I'm like, yeah, honey, that sounds great. And I'm like, let me see where dad and I can go. And they're like, no, you guys stay. So as much as they want to whine and be like, oh, you guys suck, they love us so much because we were 14 when we had them. I mean, we were literally like 7. And then we have these like babies. People just didn't even know that we were as young as we were, So it's been interesting.
Okay, I could talk to you forever, but I want to be respectful of your time and energy. So we wrap up with just telling folks where they can find you. Yeah. And if there's a nonprofit you'd like to highlight for folks to go check out and give to, we invite everyone to do a little nonprofit highlight.
Okay. Thank you so much. So everybody, my name is spelled a little differently. I'm sure you'll link it. It's Stephynie. Yes. It's Stephynie. Last name is Malik, Malik. And every social, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, everything is Stephynie Malik. My website is stephyniemalik.com. And Britta put together a special offer for you guys for free consultations. So if there's anybody who wants to have a conversation regarding their business or consulting or coaching, stephyniemalik.com/contact. And in the subject line, you would just say Mallory.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And
wow.
as far as nonprofits go, I'm having a hard time with this. So I have been looking at so much around sex trafficking. That has just become so incredibly close to me. I've had a couple very, very good friends who have had near misses with their children, one in San Jose area, which was right down the street from our house. And, a couple of them were sister schools to my daughter's schools. And so I've gotten a lot more active with these associations. And I haven't quite put my finger on, I don't want to say the best, because I think anybody working on these issues, I think it's just so huge. But I would say just anything around sex trafficking, these little angels, little boys and little girls, people think it's just a girl problem. You know, the boy problem is up just almost as much as the girl problem. Just make yourself aware. You know, if you see something, say something, and just look into what you can do to actually make yourself more aware.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining me today. This was so fun. So I really am grateful for the conversation.
You're so welcome. And please reach out if you need anything at all and let me know how I can help.
Thank you.